Somewhere beneath the shifting sands and tangled jungles of our world lie the echoes of cities so grand, so powerful, they once shaped the course of human history. Picture vast metropolises rising along ancient riverbanks, their streets bustling with merchants, scholars, and rulers whose influence stretched across continents. These were the river cities, magnificent hubs of trade, culture, and innovation that thrived for centuries, only to vanish as if swallowed by the earth itself. Their names linger in myths and fragmented texts, teasing us with glimpses of their glory. But what really happened to these lost civilizations? How could societies so advanced, so dominant, simply dissolve into the mists of time? Think about the last time you stood by a river, the way the water carves its path, relentless and unstoppable. Now imagine that same river as the lifeblood of an entire civilization, nurturing it to unimaginable heights before shifting its course or drying up entirely. These river cities were more than just settlements. They were the beating hearts of their eras, where art flourished, laws were written, and technologies were born that would change the world. The Indus Valley, Mesopotamia, and other legendary hubs didn't just fade away, they left behind clues, tantalizing fragments that hint at their brilliance and their baffling disappearances. Today, we're setting out on a journey to uncover their stories. We'll walk the ghostly streets of these forgotten capitals, piecing together the triumphs and tragedies that define them. How did they rise to such power? What forces, natural or man-made, sealed their fate? And what can their ruins teach us about our own world? From flooded plains to abandoned temples, the answers lie waiting, buried but not lost. This is the mystery of the river cities that once ruled the world, then vanished without a trace. And by the end of this video, you'll see history, and perhaps even our future, in a whole new light. To understand the incredible power of these river cities, we have to step back in time to a world where water wasn't just a resource, it was the foundation of survival and success. Picture the mighty Tigris and Euphrates, the life-giving Nile, or the winding Indus, their waters carving paths through vast landscapes. Along their banks, the first great civilizations took root, transforming simple settlements into thriving urban centers. The secret: rivers did more than quench thirst. They created the perfect conditions for agriculture, turning barren land into lush fields that could feed thousands. Every harvest season, the floodwaters deposited rich silt, a natural fertilizer that made crops flourish year after year. But food was only the beginning. Rivers became highways for trade, connecting distant regions in ways that were unimaginable before. A merchant in Babylon could exchange goods with someone from hundreds of miles away, all because the river made travel and transport possible. This flow of goods also meant an exchange of ideas, new technologies, artistic styles, and even languages spread along these watery trade routes. Cities like Mohenjo-Daro weren't just marketplaces, they were melting pots of culture where innovations in writing, mathematics, and architecture took shape. What truly set these civilizations apart, though, was their mastery of engineering. The people of Mesopotamia built intricate irrigation canals to control flooding and direct water to their fields. The Indus Valley cities had advanced drainage systems with carefully planned streets and even early forms of indoor plumbing. These weren't just conveniences, they were revolutionary systems that allowed populations to grow and thrive in ways never seen before. And with growth came power. The ability to command water meant control over food, trade, and ultimately people. Rulers of these river cities didn't just govern, they orchestrated entire economies, using their wealth to build towering temples, grand palaces, and massive walls. Thebes became a spiritual epicenter, Babylon a beacon of law and order, and Mohenjo-Daro a marvel of urban planning. Their influence stretched far beyond their borders, shaping the politics, religion, and daily life of entire regions. Yet, for all their brilliance, these cities were bound to the rivers that gave them life. What happens when the water shifts or the climate changes? The very source of their power could become their downfall. But before we explore their mysterious disappearances, let's take a moment to appreciate how these ancient innovators laid the groundwork for the modern world. From the concept of centralized government to the earliest forms of writing, their legacies still ripple through time. Mohenjo-Daro wasn't just a city, it was a masterpiece of ancient urban planning, a marvel that would put many modern metropolises to shame. Picture this, a sprawling grid of perfectly aligned streets, some as wide as 30 feet, all intersecting at right angles like a carefully drawn blueprint. Beneath those streets ran an intricate network of drains, designed to carry wastewater away from homes and public spaces. Some houses even had their own private bathrooms, with clay pipes connecting directly to the main sewer system. This wasn't just convenience, it was public health engineering on a scale the world wouldn't see again for thousands of years. But who were the people behind this brilliance? The citizens of Mohenjo-Daro left behind no grand statues of kings, no towering monuments to conquest. Instead, their legacy is one of quiet sophistication. Archaeologists have uncovered delicate pottery, finely crafted jewelry, and even children's toys, tiny carts and whistles shaped like birds. These weren't just survivors, they were a society that valued art, play, and daily comfort. Their trade connections stretched from the Persian Gulf to the Himalayas, with seals found as far away as Mesopotamia, stamped with symbols of a script that remains one of history's great unsolved puzzles. Hundreds of these inscriptions exist, but no Rosetta Stone has ever been found to crack their code. Then, around 1900 BC, something went terribly wrong. The streets fell silent, the workshops stopped producing, the meticulous drainage systems clogged with silt. For centuries, scholars debated what could have caused such a sudden collapse. Some pointed to climate change, shifting monsoon patterns, or the Indus River changing its course, starving the city of water. Others suspected invasion, citing scattered skeletons found in the ruins. But there's no evidence of large-scale violence, no burned buildings or weapons left behind. The truth might be even more unsettling. Recent research suggests a slower, more insidious decline. The water tables show signs of rising salinity, perhaps from over-irrigation, poisoning the land with salt over generations. Layers of silt reveal repeated, devastating floods. And then there's the eerie absence, no signs of panic, no hurried burials. It's as if the people simply left, packed up what they could, and walked away from a city that had become impossible to sustain. What's most haunting isn't the mystery of their disappearance, but the echoes of their existence. In a world where we grapple with climate crises and resource management, Mohenjo-Daro stands as a warning and a wonder. A city built to last, undone by forces its engineers couldn't foresee. Yet in its quiet ruins, we find something timeless, the imprint of a people who, for a fleeting moment, built something extraordinary. Babylon wasn't just a city, it was a legend carved into the very fabric of history. Imagine standing at the gates of this Mesopotamian wonder, where the Ishtar Gate gleamed with lapis lazuli and golden lions, a spectacle so dazzling it was said to rival the sun. Beyond those gates stretched a metropolis of staggering ambition, the hanging gardens, tiered terraces bursting with greenery, rumored to be a king's gift to his homesick queen. The towering Etemenanki ziggurat, a stairway to the gods, inspired tales that would later weave into the myth of the Tower of Babel. This was Babylon at its zenith, a place where power and mythology intertwined. But how did a city of such grandeur crumble into dust? The answer isn't as simple as invasion or catastrophe. Babylon's decline was a slow unraveling, a tapestry of human and environmental threads coming apart. Take Hammurabi, the king who etched his name into eternity with one of history's first legal codes. His reign brought order, but later rulers faced rebellions and shifting alliances. Nebuchadnezzar II, the warrior king who rebuilt Babylon into a spectacle, still couldn't shield it from the tides of change. By the time Alexander the Great arrived in the 4th century BC, dreaming of making Babylon his eastern capital, the city was already a shadow of itself. Some blame the rivers, the lifeblood of Mesopotamia. The Euphrates, once a reliable ally, began shifting its course, leaving canals to silt up and farms to wither. Others point to the weight of empire itself. Babylon's wealth made it a target, sacked by the Hittites, the Assyrians, and finally the Persians. Yet the most haunting theory comes from the people who lived there. Ancient tablets speak of divine abandonment, of gods turning their backs on the city. Could it be that Babylon's greatest sin was its own pride? The very ambition that built its towers may have sealed its fate. Today, the ruins whisper conflicting stories. Crumbled bricks bear the fingerprints of laborers who served kings long forgotten. The Ishtar Gate, now reconstructed in a Berlin museum, is a ghost of its former self. But Babylon's legacy isn't just in its fall, it's in what it taught the world. From the concept of legal justice to the foundations of astronomy, its influence outlasted its walls. And perhaps that's the real lesson here. Even the mightiest cities are fleeting, but the ideas they birth can endure long after the last stone has turned to sand. Thebes rose from the banks of the Nile like a mirage of eternal power, white limestone temples glowing under the desert sun, gold-capped obelisks piercing the sky, and a riverfront bustling with grain ships and foreign envoys. This wasn't just a city, it was the spiritual and political heartbeat of Egypt for over 1,000 years. At its peak, Thebes boasted monuments that defied imagination. Karnak Temple, a forest of towering columns inscribed with the names of gods and pharaohs, and the Valley of the Kings, where rulers like Tutankhamun were buried in chambers filled with treasures meant to accompany them into eternity. But empires don't fall overnight. Thebes' decline began with something as mundane as geography. As trade routes shifted toward the Mediterranean, cities like Alexandria, closer to the sea and backed by Greek and Roman influence, became the new centers of commerce. Thebes, once the crossroads of wealth, found itself sidelined, its docks quieter with each passing decade. Then came the religious revolutions. When Akhenaten rejected Thebes' patron god Ammon in favor of the sun disk Aten, he didn't just move the capital, he shattered a spiritual order that had endured for centuries. Though later rulers restored the old gods, the cracks in Thebes' divine mandate never fully healed. Yet the final blow might have been the most ordinary of all, time itself. The Nile's annual floods, which once nourished Thebes' fields, began depositing layers of silt that slowly buried the city's waterfront districts. Earthquakes toppled colossi, and sandstorms scoured hieroglyphs from temple walls. By the time the Romans arrived, Thebes was already a relic, a place tourists visited to gawk at ruins, much like we do today. What's haunting is how much of Thebes survives. Walk through Luxor today and you'll see farmers tilling soil beside half-buried statues, their faces still staring toward the horizon. The city's fate isn't just a lesson in decline, it's a mirror. In an age where coastal cities rise while inland hubs fade, where belief systems shift overnight, Thebes whispers a warning. No glory, no matter how radiant, is immune to the tides of change. But perhaps that's the beauty of it. The pharaohs built for eternity, yet their greatest legacy isn't the stone they left behind. It's the truth that even the grandest dreams must one day make room for what comes next. Harappa stood as Mohenjo-Daro's silent twin, a city cut from the same cloth of ingenuity and mystery. If you held one of its uniform bricks in your hand, you'd notice something astonishing. Each one matched a precise ratio, standardized across hundreds of miles of construction. This wasn't just craftsmanship, it was evidence of a society so coordinated, so meticulous, that even modern builders would marvel. Streets laid out in perfect grids, wells positioned at regular intervals, and granaries designed to store surplus harvests. Every detail whispered of a civilization that mastered the art of living together. But Harappa's true brilliance lay in its connections. Artifacts found here tell stories of trade routes stretching from the Arabian Sea to the Himalayas. Carnelian beads from Gujarat, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, even shells from the distant coast all passed through Harappa's bustling markets. This wasn't just commerce, it was cultural exchange on a scale unmatched for millennia. The city thrived as a crossroads where ideas flowed as freely as goods. Then, like Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa's vibrant streets fell silent. The layers of its ruins tell a story of slow unraveling. Archaeologists sifting through the soil found clues: flood deposits stacked like tragic chapters, wells abandoned mid-use, and homes filled with silt. Some theories point to the Saraswati River, a once mighty waterway that may have dried up, leaving Harappa's fields parched. Others suggest a darker twist. Skeletal remains show signs of malnutrition, hinting at famine or disease. Yet there's no evidence of war, no shattered gates or mass graves. Instead, the artifacts suggest something quieter, a deliberate departure. Household items carefully stored, valuables taken, as if the people packed what they could and walked away. Were they searching for new rivers, new lands to nurture, or did they simply adapt, scattering into smaller communities when the city could no longer sustain them? The haunting truth is that Harappa's people left no written records to explain their choices. Their script, etched into seals and tablets, remains undeciphered, a language lost to time. But their legacy lingers in the most unexpected places. Those standardized bricks, their proportions influenced construction across the region for centuries. The trade networks they pioneered became templates for future empires. Harappa didn't just vanish, it seeped into the DNA of the world that followed, a reminder that even in disappearance, greatness leaves echoes. Standing among its ruins today, you can't help but wonder, if these walls could speak, what would they tell us about resilience, about knowing when to hold on and when to let go? In a world grappling with climate shifts and fading resources, Harappa's story feels less like ancient history and more like a whisper from the future. The Saraswati River wasn't just water, it was the soul of an entire civilization. Ancient hymns in the Rigveda sing of its majesty, calling it the best of mothers, the mightiest of rivers, flowing from the mountains to the sea. Texts describe bustling cities along its banks, their granaries overflowing, their artisans crafting wonders. Yet today, if you follow those descriptions, you'll find only dust and silence. A riverbed bleached by the sun, its secrets buried under centuries of sand. How does a lifeline so vital simply vanish? Clues lie hidden in the land itself. Satellite images reveal the ghostly outline of a massive river system, its dry channels snaking through what's now the Thar Desert. Geological surveys show layers of sediment round, water-worn pebbles nestled beneath the dunes, proof of a once powerful current. But the most telling evidence comes from the ruins. Dozens of Harappan settlements cluster along this ancient path, their wells and reservoirs positioned as if still waiting for the Saraswati's return. Scientists piece together a puzzle of slow-motion disaster. One theory points to monsoons that shifted eastward around 4,000 years ago, starving the river of rain. Others argue tectonic movements tilted the land, diverting its tributaries toward the Ganges instead. Imagine the desperation as wells ran dry, as crops withered in fields that had fed generations. Yet there's no evidence of sudden catastrophe, no mass graves, no signs of violence. Instead, artifacts suggest a careful retreat. Families packed their pottery, their tools, and walked toward new waters, leaving behind empty streets that the desert would reclaim. The Saraswati's disappearance wasn't just a loss of water. It was an unraveling of worlds. Trade routes that once thrived along its banks dissolved, scattering cultures that had flourished for centuries. The language of the Vedas, born on its shores, became an echo in distant lands. And yet, in a twist of irony, the river never truly left. Its waters still flow underground, feeding wells in Rajasthan to this day. Villagers speak of the lost river as if it's merely sleeping, waiting to rise again. Perhaps that's why the search for the Saraswati captivates us. It's not just about solving a geological mystery, it's about understanding how civilizations adapt when the ground shifts beneath them. In a world where rivers are drying and coastlines creeping, the story of this vanished giant feels less like history and more like a map to our own future. A reminder that even the mightiest forces of nature are fleeting, and survival often means learning to let go. The rise of the Acadian Empire was nothing short of legendary, a story etched into clay tablets that still survive today. Sargon of Akkad, the empire's founder, began as a humble cupbearer before seizing power in a coup so audacious it became the stuff of myth. His conquests stretched from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean, uniting warring city-states under a single rule for the first time in human history. Picture the scene, a vast network of bureaucrats sending cuneiform tablets across the land, standardized weights and measures enabling trade from Anatolia to the Indus Valley, and a standing army so formidable it kept rivals in check for decades. This wasn't just an empire, it was a blueprint for how civilizations could organize themselves on a scale never before imagined. Yet, within a century of Sargon's death, the empire lay in ruins. The tablets tell a haunting tale of cities abandoned, of fields choked with salt, of once loyal regions rising in revolt. One particularly vivid account describes Naram-Sin, Sargon's grandson, tearing down the sacred temple of Enlil in a fit of arrogance, only to face divine retribution as the gods turned their backs on Akkad. But was it really a curse or something far more tangible? Modern science offers clues. Core samples from nearby lakes reveal a catastrophic drought around 2200 BCE, a dry spell so severe it lasted for 3 centuries. Dust layers in ancient sediments tell of farmland turning to desert, of crops failing year after year. The empire's collapse wasn't just political, it was environmental. But here's the twist, drought alone doesn't explain everything. Tablets from the period speak of invading Gutian tribes sweeping down from the mountains, yet archaeologists find little evidence of widespread destruction. Instead, there's a quieter narrative of disintegration, governors hoarding grain, trade routes fraying, and local leaders declaring independence as Akkad's grip weakened. The empire didn't so much fall as unravel, thread by thread. What makes the Akkadian collapse so chilling is its familiarity. A centralized system stretched too thin, ecological mismanagement, and the fragility of power. These aren't just ancient problems. The empire's legacy lingers in the ruins of its ziggurats, but also in the warning they carry. Even the mightiest structures, whether of brick or bureaucracy, are vulnerable when the world beneath them shifts. And perhaps that's the real curse of Sargon's successors, not divine anger, but the hubris of believing any empire, no matter how grand, can outlast the forces of nature and human nature alike. Cahokia's towering mounds rise from the Illinois floodplain like silent sentinels, the last witnesses to a city that once rivaled medieval London in size. Picture this, a sprawling metropolis of 20,000 people, its skyline dominated by Monk's Mound, an earthen pyramid larger at its base than Egypt's Great Pyramid. Below it, a grand plaza stretched for 50 acres, flanked by smaller mounds where temples and elite residences stood. This wasn't just a settlement, it was the beating heart of Mississippian culture, a hub where copper from the Great Lakes, seashells from the Gulf Coast, and obsidian from the Rocky Mountains changed hands in a bustling marketplace. Yet by the time European explorers stumbled upon these ruins centuries later, Cahokia was already a ghost city. The question isn't just why it fell, it's how a society so advanced could leave so few clues behind. Archaeologists sifting through the soil found no evidence of invasion, no mass graves suggesting catastrophe. Instead, they uncovered subtler hints, tree rings showing erratic rainfall patterns during Cahokia's decline, layers of trash heaps revealing overhunted deer and exhausted soils. The most telling discovery, a palisade wall built around the city's core late in its history, a barrier that suggests not outside threats but internal strife. Theories abound. Some point to climate change, the medieval warm period giving way to cooler, unpredictable weather that ruined harvests. Others blame Cahokia's own success. As populations swelled, forests were cleared for farmland, game became scarce, and the once fertile floodplains may have been overworked. But perhaps the most haunting possibility is social collapse. Burial sites reveal stark class divisions, elites buried with treasures, commoners with nothing. Did inequality finally fracture the city from within? Or did people simply walk away, dispersing into smaller villages when the land could no longer sustain their grand vision? What lingers today isn't just mystery, but resonance. Cahokia's story mirrors modern struggles with sustainability and social cohesion. Its mounds, now grass-covered and serene, challenge us to consider what truly makes a civilization endure. The answer might lie not in the grandeur we build, but in the balance we keep with nature, with each other, and with the choices that determine whether cities thrive or become whispers in the earth. Deep in the rainforests of Central America, where howler monkeys swing through the canopy and tangled vines clutch at crumbling stone, stand the silent witnesses to one of history's most dramatic disappearances. The Maya didn't just build cities, they engineered jungles into metropolises, carving terraces into hillsides, channeling water through intricate reservoirs, and raising pyramids so precise they functioned as celestial calendars. At its peak around 800 CE, Tikal was a sprawling urban hub with over 100,000 residents, its temples towering 200 feet above the forest floor. Nearby, Kapon's sculpted stairways told the stories of kings, while Palink's palace complex boasted running water and steam baths. This was a civilization that mapped the stars with naked-eye astronomy, developed the most advanced writing system in the Americas, and traded jade and obsidian across thousands of miles. Then, within a single century, the heartland emptied. The last dated monument at Tikal was erected in 869 CE. By 900, the great cities of the southern lowlands were deserted, their plazas overtaken by strangler figs, their temples echoing only with the cries of toucans. Unlike Cahokia or Harappa, the Maya left behind written records, thousands of glyphs chronicling wars, rituals, and dynasties. But these very texts deepen the mystery. There's no single account of collapse, no fall of Rome moment. Instead, the clues are scattered like puzzle pieces across the rainforest. Take drought. Sediment cores from nearby lakes reveal a catastrophic dry period between 800 and 950 CE, coinciding exactly with the abandonment. Tree rings show decades of relentless aridity, the kind that would have cracked reservoirs and withered cornfields. But here's the catch: northern Maya cities like Chichen Itza not only survived, they flourished during this same period. If drought was the killer, why did some thrive while others starved? Then there's warfare. Glyphs from this era speak of escalating conflicts, of star wars between rival city-states. At Dos Pilas, archaeologists found mass graves with skeletons bearing axe wounds. Tukul's last known ruler, Jasor Chan Kayawil II, boasts on stelae of burning his enemies' cities. Yet war alone doesn't explain why entire regions were abandoned rather than conquered. Perhaps the most unsettling theory is ecological collapse. The Maya transformed their environment on a staggering scale, clearing forests for agriculture, diverting rivers, and building wetland farms called bajos. Pollen studies show that by 800 CE, deforestation had altered local rainfall patterns, creating a feedback loop of drought and crop failure. The very ingenuity that sustained their cities may have sown the seeds of their undoing, but the most haunting evidence isn't in the grand ruins, it's in the small, intimate traces. A half-woven basket left mid-stitch in a Kapon workshop, unfinished carvings at Quiragar, as if the artisans expected to return. These weren't people fleeing catastrophe, they were communities making agonizing choices, dispersing slowly into the forest. The Maya didn't vanish, they adapted, shifting north or blending into smaller villages. Their descendants still live across the region, speaking Mayan languages and preserving traditions. What lingers today isn't just the mystery of collapse, but the lesson of resilience. The Maya remind us that civilizations don't always fall, they change. And in their silent cities, wrapped in roots and vines, we see a mirror for our own age of climate shifts and societal fractures. The stones whisper a question: when the next drought comes, will we be the people who cling to crumbling pyramids, or the ones who learn to walk new paths? Angkor wasn't just a city, it was an empire carved from water and stone, a symphony of human ambition played out across the Cambodian jungle. Picture this: 1,000 temples glowing pink at dawn, their spires mirrored in vast reservoirs called barrays, each one large enough to hold a modern stadium. Causeways lined with stone giants stretched for miles, connecting neighborhoods where nearly 1 million people lived, making Angkor the largest pre-industrial city on Earth. At its heart stood Angkor Wat, a temple so immense it could fit Notre Dame Cathedral within its walls 5 times over. This wasn't just architecture, it was a declaration of divinity, a celestial city built to mirror the Hindu cosmos itself. Yet by the 15th century, the jungle had swallowed it whole. The question isn't just why Angkor fell, it's how a civilization so masterful in hydraulic engineering, so precise in its celestial alignments, could vanish beneath vines and strangler figs. The answer lies in the very systems that made Angkor thrive. The Khmer Empire's genius was its water network, canals, moats, and reservoirs so advanced they stabilized harvests even during monsoons. But recent LiDAR scans reveal a chilling truth: those same canals may have been Angkor's undoing. Sediment cores show signs of catastrophic flooding, followed by prolonged droughts. The intricate system, designed for a stable climate, couldn't adapt when the weather patterns shifted. Then there's the human factor. Inscriptions speak of later kings abandoning Angkor for new capitals nearer the Mekong, lured by maritime trade. But excavations tell a subtler story. Archaeologists found evidence of hastily repaired canals, a sign the system was failing even before the elite fled. And in the outer neighborhoods, homes weren't burned or ransacked. They were simply left with tools and cookware still in place, as if the residents expected to return. What's most haunting isn't the abandonment, but the slow reclaiming. Roots pried apart mortar, storms toppled gateways, and the jungle did what it always does, it absorbed. Yet Angkor's legacy didn't disappear. Local monks kept the memory of Angkor Wat alive, tending its shrines even as the forest closed in. And today, those same stones whisper a paradox. The greatest human achievements are often the most fragile, bound to the land that nurtures them. In an age of rising seas and shifting climates, Angkor stands as a monument not just to grandeur but to humility, a reminder that even empires must one day make peace with the earth. Pompeii wasn't swallowed by a shifting river or worn down by centuries of neglect. It was erased in a single, cataclysmic day. One moment, the bustling Roman port hummed with life, merchants haggling over amphorae of wine, children chasing each other through colonnaded streets, bakers pulling loaves from oven-blackened ovens. The next, Mount Vesuvius roared to life, raining down pumice and ash so thick it collapsed roofs under its weight. Then came the pyroclastic surge, a superheated avalanche of gas and rock moving at 100 miles per hour, sealing the city under 30 feet of debris. Unlike the slow unraveling of Mohenjo-Daro or Babylon, Pompeii's end was instant, a snapshot preserved with horrifying clarity. What makes Pompeii unique isn't just the scale of destruction, but the eerie intimacy of its ruins. Plaster casts of victims capture their final moments: a man shielding his face, a dog twisted in agony, a child clutching a wooden toy. Graffiti still adorns tavern walls with crude jokes and election slogans untouched for 2,000 years. A loaf of bread sits carbonized in an oven, its baker's stamp still legible. This wasn't just a city destroyed, it was a city paused, offering archaeologists something vanishingly rare: a day in the life of an ancient civilization, uninterrupted by time. Yet for all its suddenness, Pompeii's fate wasn't entirely unpredictable. Vesuvius had grumbled for years, earthquakes shattered homes decades before the eruption, a warning the Romans misinterpreted as divine displeasure rather than geological unrest. The parallels to other lost cities are striking, like the Maya ignoring deforestation's impact or Cahokia overextending its farmland. Pompeii's people misread the signs until it was too late. But here's the twist: unlike river cities that declined over generations, Pompeii's end came with no chance to adapt, no slow migration to safer ground. Its tragedy lies in its abruptness, a reminder that nature's wrath can outpace even the most advanced society's defenses. The real lesson of Pompeii isn't about destruction, it's about preservation. While other vanished cities left only fragments, Pompeii's ruins offer a complete blueprint of Roman urban life. Its brothels, theaters, and fast food counters, Thermopolia, reveal a society startlingly modern in its rhythms. Yet this same preservation carries a warning. Modern Naples sprawls just miles from Vesuvius, a metropolis of 3 million living in the shadow of a still active volcano. If history teaches us anything, it's that disaster rarely strikes where we expect until it does. Pompeii's ghosts whisper a question: when the next eruption comes, will we be the civilization that heeds the warnings, or the one frozen in ash for future archaeologists to ponder? Climate change wasn't just a backdrop to these collapses, it was often the unseen architect, quietly reshaping the fate of civilizations. Take the Acadian Empire, where a 3-century drought turned fertile plains into dust bowls, or the Maya, whose intricate water systems couldn't compensate for relentless dry spells. Even Angkor's brilliant hydraulic network, designed to withstand monsoons, faltered when the rain stopped coming. These weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a pattern where environmental shifts exposed the fragility of human ingenuity. But here's the twist: climate alone rarely delivered the final blow. It was the interplay between nature and human choices that sealed these cities' fates. The Maya, for instance, might have survived drought alone, but combine it with deforestation, and their agricultural systems buckled. Similarly, the Indus valleys over-irrigation poisoned their soil with salt, compounding the stress of shifting river courses. These civilizations didn't just face a changing climate, they faced the consequences of pushing their environments too far, too fast. What's startling is how modern these ancient struggles feel. Today, as reservoirs dry up and coastlines erode, we're grappling with the same forces that toppled the Khmer or the Acadians. The difference, we have something they lacked: foresight. Ice cores and sediment layers give us hard evidence of past climate shifts, while satellite data maps our vulnerabilities in real time. The ruins of these lost cities aren't just relics, they're case studies in resilience. Yet the most haunting lesson lies in adaptation. Some societies, like the Maya's northern outposts, survived by shifting crops or relocating. Others, like Mohenjo-Daro's residents, simply walked away when the land could no longer sustain them. Their choices echo in today's climate migrations, where entire communities are already on the move. The past whispers a question: when the next great shift comes, will we cling to sinking ground, or will we learn from those who knew when to let go? War drums and battle cries echo through the ruins of cities that met their end not by drought or decay, but by the sword. The Hicksos, a mysterious people who swept into Egypt around 1650 BC, didn't just conquer, they reshaped history. For over a century, they ruled from the Nile Delta, their capital at Avaris becoming a melting pot of cultures. Egyptian records describe them as foreign invaders, yet archaeology tells a subtler story. Their chariots and composite bows revolutionized warfare, while their art blended Egyptian and Levantine styles. But when the native pharaohs finally expelled them, they systematically erased Avaris from memory, dismantling its palaces and burying its legacy under new constructions. This wasn't just defeat, it was deliberate oblivion. Then there were the Sea Peoples, a confederation of marauders whose very name still baffles historians. Around 1200 BC, they razed cities across the Mediterranean with terrifying efficiency. Clay tablets from Ugarit, a thriving port in modern-day Syria, capture the panic in frantic messages: the enemy's ships are already here, our cities are burned. The ruins of Hattusa, capital of the mighty Hittite Empire, bear scars of sudden destruction: charred walls, shattered statues, and grain stores left to rot. But who were these attackers? Theories range from displaced Mycenaeans to climate refugees, yet their true origins remain one of antiquity's greatest puzzles. What's chilling is how often conquest rewrote history itself. When the Assyrians sacked Babylon in 689 BC, King Sennacherib boasted of diverting canals to wash away the city's very foundations. The Mongols didn't just overthrow cities like Baghdad in 1258, they pulverized libraries, irrigation systems, and entire neighborhoods, ensuring recovery was impossible. These weren't mere changes of power, they were cultural resets. Yet invasion alone rarely tells the full story. Dig deeper, and you'll find that many conquered cities were already weakened by famine, internal strife, or environmental stress. The Sea Peoples didn't topple the Hittites in isolation. A prolonged drought had already strained their empire. Even Avaris had seen tensions between Hyksos rulers and Egyptian subjects long before the revolt. Conflict often wasn't the cause of collapse, but the final blow to societies already teetering on the edge. The lesson here isn't just about destruction, it's about erasure. When new powers rise, they don't just defeat their predecessors, they silence them. Statues are defaced, records burned, and narratives rewritten until only fragments remain. But sometimes, like at Avaris, the earth itself remembers what conquerors tried to forget. Archaeologists sifting through the silt still find Hyksos pottery beneath Egyptian foundations. proof that no erasure is ever truly complete. The lifeblood of any great civilization flows through its markets and trade routes, a truth as ancient as the first clay tablets recording grain sales. For cities like Petra, carved into rose-red cliffs in Jordan's desert, commerce wasn't just an activity, it was the reason for existence. Picture camel caravans snaking through narrow gorges, their loads of frankincense and myrrh destined for Rome's temples and Egypt's embalming workshops. Petra's wealth built theaters and tombs fit for gods, all funded by its monopoly on spice routes. But when Roman ships began bypassing the desert by sailing directly to India, the caravan slowed, then stopped. The city's water channels, once brimming with life, ran dry as merchants moved on. Petra didn't fall to invaders or quake, sit withered from economic obsolescence, its grandeur left to the wind and sand. Likewise, the great Silk Road cities of Central Asia faced a similar reckoning. Samarkand's bazaars once glittered with Chinese silks and Persian silver, its crossroads position making it unimaginably wealthy. Then came the age of exploration, when Portuguese and Spanish ships charted sea routes to Asia. Overnight, the overland Silk Road became a relic, and cities that had thrived for a millennium found themselves stranded inland like ships on a receding tide. The crumbling caravanserais and abandoned workshops weren't just signs of decline, they were tombstones for an entire economic era. But economic collapse rarely strikes alone. Often, it's the domino that topples other vulnerabilities. Take Teotihuacan, the colossal Mesoamerican metropolis, whose influence once stretched from the Maya lowlands to the American Southwest. Its workshops mass-produced obsidian blades and ornate pottery, trading them across continents. Yet when climate shifts disrupted agriculture around 550 CE, hunger weakened the workforce. Artisans couldn't produce, merchants couldn't sell, and the city's elite, their wealth tied to trade, lost their grip. The result, a power vacuum that ended with the burning of temples and a mass exodus. Here, the economy wasn't just a casualty, it was the fuse that lit the powder keg of social unrest. What's haunting is how modern these ancient patterns feel. Venice's decline when Atlantic trade routes eclipsed the Mediterranean, or Detroit's struggles as manufacturing moved overseas. History keeps replaying the same tragic melody. The difference, our globalized world accelerates these shifts at dizzying speed. One day, a city thrives as a tech hub. The next, automation or remote work leaves its offices empty. The ruins of Petra and Samarkand whisper a warning. No economic golden age lasts forever. Adapt or fade away. It's the oldest lesson in the book, written in the dust of 100 forgotten marketplaces. Faith could build cities and just as swiftly abandon them. Take Ani, the medieval Armenian capital known as the City of 1,001 Churches. At its peak, its skyline bristled with soaring cathedrals, their intricate stonework illuminated by countless oil lamps. Pilgrims flocked to its shrines, merchants traded silks beneath its vaulted bazaars, and scholars filled its scriptoriums with illuminated gospels. Then came the Seljuk conquest in 1064, shifting trade routes and introducing Islam to the region. Within centuries, earthquakes and Mongol raids left Ani vulnerable, but it was the slow erosion of its religious significance that emptied its streets. The churches stood silent, their frescoes fading as power and piety drifted elsewhere. Not all spiritual transitions were so gradual. In Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital, the arrival of Spanish conquistadors in 1519 brought a theological earthquake. Where the Templo Mayor once echoed with rituals honoring Huitzilopochtli, the war god, Catholic friars hastily erected churches using stones from demolished pyramids. For the Aztecs, this wasn't just conquest, it was the unraveling of cosmic order. Their sacred calendar, tied to agricultural cycles and temple ceremonies, became obsolete under foreign rule. Without the rituals that sustained their worldview, the city's heart stopped beating. What remained wasn't just ruins, but a hollowed-out shell of belief. Yet sometimes faith's role was subtler. Great Zimbabwe, the sprawling stone city that dominated southern Africa for 4 centuries, thrived as a spiritual hub. Its conical tower and hilltop ruins suggest ceremonies tied to ancestral worship and kingship. But when trade routes shifted in the 15th century, so did spiritual authority. As Swahili merchants brought Islam and Portuguese explorers introduced Christianity, the old ways lost their hold. The stones didn't crumble, they were simply left behind like altars to forgotten gods. The most haunting examples are places where religion itself became a relic. In Turkey's Mount Nemrut, the colossal stone heads of gods gaze eternally across the mountainside, toppled from their thrones by earthquakes or iconoclasts. King Antiochus built this sanctuary in the 1st century BCE, blending Greek and Persian deities into a personal cult. Today, the statues stare blankly, their meaning as lost as the language of their inscriptions. Faith didn't just fade here, it petrified. What these cities share is a paradox. The very beliefs that inspired their greatest monuments could also hasten their end. When new gods replace old ones, sacred spaces become skeletons. But look closer and you'll find resilience too. In Ani, Armenian Christians still light candles in the rubble. In Mexico City, traces of Aztec rituals survive in Dia de los Muertos. The stones may forget, but people rarely do, even when the cities themselves slip into silence. Technological decline wasn't always about losing knowledge sometimes. It was about failing to adapt. Take the case of the Roman aqueducts, engineering marvels that carried water across mountains and valleys to supply cities like Rome itself. For centuries, these systems were maintained with precision, their arches cleaned, their channels repaired. But as the empire frayed, so did the expertise needed to sustain them. By the 6th century, many aqueducts lay broken, their stones scavenged for new buildings. The result, cities that once boasted public baths and fountains now relied on contaminated wells, inviting disease and decline. Rome didn't forget how to build aqueducts, it simply lost the will to prioritize them. Then there's the cautionary tale of the Indus Valley's standardized bricks. At their peak, Harappan builders used uniform ratios that ensured stability across hundreds of miles of construction. Yet later cultures in the same region abandoned this precision, opting for irregular, hastily made bricks. Was it a loss of knowledge or something more subtle? Archaeologists note that as trade networks fragmented, the need for large-scale coordination vanished. Without cities to supply or empires to impress, the old standard seemed unnecessary. But this shift came at a cost. Buildings became less durable, less capable of withstanding floods or earthquakes. A society that once engineered for eternity now built just for tomorrow. The most striking example might be the fate of Greek fire, the Byzantine Empire's legendary naval weapon. This incendiary compound could burn on water, turning enemy ships into floating infernos. Its exact recipe was a closely guarded secret, passed down through generations of chemists. But when Constantinople fell in 1453, the knowledge vanished overnight. Some speculate the last experts died defending the city's walls. Others believe the formula was simply too complex to preserve without institutional support. Either way, the loss left later empires without a tool that could have reshaped naval warfare for centuries. Yet technological decline rarely happens in isolation. Often, it's a symptom of deeper crises: economic collapse, political instability, or environmental stress. The Maya, for instance, didn't just forget how to maintain their reservoirs. They were too busy fighting wars and fleeing droughts to prioritize them. Similarly, the abandonment of Angkor's hydraulic network wasn't ignorance. It was a calculated retreat from a system too vast to sustain as resources dwindled. What makes these stories so unsettling is their modern resonance. In a world where software updates obsolete entire industries overnight, where skills can fade without practice, we're all vulnerable to the same forces that undid ancient innovators. The ruins whisper a question: does progress move forward, or does it simply circle back, leaving pockets of brilliance buried in time? The answer might lie not in what we invent, but in what we choose to keep alive. The idea of entire cities emptying out sounds like something from a dystopian novel, yet archaeology tells us it happened again and again. When the people of Mohenjo-Daro walked away, they didn't just vanish into thin air. Recent excavations in Gujarat and Rajasthan have uncovered smaller settlements with the same distinct pottery styles, the same standardized weights, even the same mysterious script. It's as if the Indus Valley civilization didn't collapse, it simply packed up and moved east, trading monumental cities for smaller, more adaptable villages. Climate shifts often spurred these migrations. Take the mysterious Garamontes of the Sahara, who thrived in what's now Libya by tapping underground aquifers. When those water sources dried up around 500 CE, they didn't wait for the end. Satellite imagery reveals ancient caravan routes leading south toward Lake Chad, where their descendants still live today. Similarly, the ancestral Pueblones of the American Southwest left their cliff dwellings at Mesa Verde, not because of war or plague, but because a decades-long drought made corn cultivation impossible. Tree rings show they timed their exodus perfectly, just before the land became truly uninhabitable. But migration wasn't always about survival. Sometimes it was opportunity pulling people away. The Phoenicians didn't abandon Tyre and Sidon because those cities failed. They built new hubs like Carthage when trade networks expanded westward. Viking settlers didn't flee Scandinavia as much as follow rumors of richer farmland in Iceland and Greenland. These were calculated risks, not desperate flights. What's fascinating is how these journeys reshaped cultures. The Bantu migrations across Africa, starting around 3,000 years ago, didn't just spread people. They spread ironworking techniques, new crops like yams and bananas, and linguistic roots that still connect hundreds of modern languages. When the Lapita people sailed from New Guinea to Polynesia, they didn't just bring canoes, they brought an entire worldview, one that still echoes in Maori navigation chants today. Yet mass migration left ghost cities in its wake. Walk through the empty plazas of Çatalhöyük in Turkey, where house after house was carefully sealed up around 7500 BCE, and you can almost hear the echoes of farewells. No signs of violence, no evidence of catastrophe, just generations of families making the conscious choice to seek something new. The lesson here isn't just about movement, it's about reinvention. These civilizations didn't disappear, they transformed, carrying their knowledge like seeds to new soil. In an age of rising seas and shifting climates, their stories feel less like ancient history and more like a playbook for resilience. After all, the greatest survival skill our ancestors passed down wasn't how to build mighty cities, it was knowing when to let them go. Earthquakes don't just shake the ground, they shatter the foundations of civilizations. In the year 365 CE, a tsunami taller than the lighthouse of Alexandria slammed into Crete, swallowing entire coastal cities whole. The Minoan palace of Knossos, already weakened by volcanic ash from Thera's eruption centuries earlier, never recovered. But here's the haunting part. Geological cores show this wasn't the first disaster to hit the region. Layers of rubble reveal cycles of rebuilding, each time on thinner margins. By the time that final wave came, the Minoans weren't just facing nature's wrath, they were exhausted, their resources stretched too thin to start over. Floods followed the same cruel pattern along the Yellow River, where the ancient Chinese city of Liangzhu thrived for 1,000 years. Sophisticated dams and canals turned marshlands into rice paddies, fueling a jade-carving elite. Then, around 4,300 years ago, monsoon rains triggered a catastrophic breach in the river's banks. Sediment analysis tells the story: 28 feet of clay deposited in a single event, burying streets under what essentially became concrete. But Liangzhu's farmers had seen floods before. What made this one different? Pollen samples provide the clue. Decades of deforestation upstream had stripped the land of roots to hold the soil. The disaster wasn't just an act of nature, it was the bill coming due for generations of environmental strain. Then there's the case of Helike, a Greek city that vanished overnight in 373 BC. Ancient writers described how Poseidon's wrath sank the entire metropolis beneath the sea, leaving only twisted olive trees marking the spot. For centuries, scholars dismissed it as myth until 1988, when archaeologists found Helike's ruins not underwater, but buried under 15 feet of lagoon sediment. The culprit, a massive earthquake, liquefied the soft delta soil, causing the city to literally slide into the earth. But dig deeper into the historical records, and you'll find hints that Helike was already struggling. Coin hoards suggest economic turmoil, while inscriptions mention food shortages. The quake didn't destroy a thriving city, it toppled a society already wobbling on its knees. The lesson these ruins teach us is unsettling. Natural disasters rarely strike in isolation, they exploit vulnerabilities we create. When the Indus Valley cities baked under drought, it was their over-irrigation that salted the fields. When the Maya faced hurricanes, it was their deforestation that left hillsides to erode. And today, as rising oceans lap at Miami's foundations or wildfires chew through Californian suburbs, we're forced to ask, are we building resilient cities or just stacking dominoes for the next big shake? The difference between collapse and survival might not be the disaster itself, but what we've done or failed to do long before the Earth begins to move. Archaeology has become a time machine, revealing secrets these lost cities never meant for us to find. Take the recent LiDAR scans over the Guatemalan jungle, lasers piercing the canopy to expose 60,000 previously unknown Maya structures. Entire networks of roads, farms, and fortresses lay hidden for centuries, proving their civilization was far more extensive than we imagined. These aren't just ruins, they're blueprints of societies that once pulsed with life. In Turkey, ground-penetrating radar uncovered a sprawling underground city beneath Cappadocia, its tunnels wide enough for chariots, and along the dried-up Gagga-Hakra riverbed in India, researchers found over 200 Harappan sites using satellite imagery, tracing the ghostly path of the mythical Saraswati River. But some of the most telling discoveries aren't grand structures, they're quiet, everyday objects. A single child's footprint preserved in wet clay at Mohenjo-Daro speaks louder than any temple. At Catalhoyuk, wall paintings depict volcanic eruptions witnessed 9,000 years ago, their vibrant colors still clinging to plaster. In Pompeii, a carbonized loaf of bread bears its baker's stamp, seller, slave of Quintus Granius Verus. These aren't just artifacts, they're frozen moments, letting us peer over the shoulders of people who never dreamed we'd be watching. Science has even cracked mysteries that stumped scholars for generations. DNA analysis of bones at Cahokia revealed a matrilineal society with power passing through female lines. Isotope studies on teeth from Angkor cemeteries show workers migrated from hundreds of miles away to build its temples. And in Mesopotamia, CT scans of cuneiform tablets exposed earlier layers of text beneath, like ancient palimpsests whispering forgotten contracts or prayers. Perhaps most startling are the environmental clues. Pollen samples from Greenland's ice cores track the exact year the Roman lead smelting industry collapsed. Soil layers at Tel Leylan in Syria prove a 3-century drought coincided with Akkad's fall. Even tree rings play detective. Sequoias in California recorded a global climate catastrophe in 541 CE, likely explaining chaos from Constantinople to Teotihuacan. Yet for all our tools, some enigmas resist solving. The Indus Valley script remains undeciphered, its symbols staring back at us like a locked diary. The purpose of Cambodia's giant stone spheres scattered near ancient quarries still baffles experts, and who carved Peru's Nazca lines and why may forever hover just beyond our grasp. What's clear is that these cities didn't vanish without leaving traces. They're speaking to us through pottery shards and irrigation canals, through collapsed aqueducts and orphaned statues. The challenge isn't just finding their voices, but listening to what they're trying to say about resilience, hubris, and the delicate balance between civilization and nature. Every trowel of dirt turned, every pixel of satellite imagery analyzed, brings us closer to understanding not just how these worlds ended, but how they thrived, and what that means for our own. Even with satellites scanning from above and shovels scraping layers of earth below, some cities guard their secrets fiercely. The Indus Valley civilization left behind thousands of inscriptions, tiny seals and tablets covered in elegant symbols, but no Rosetta Stone to crack their code. Scholars have proposed links to ancient Tamil, Sanskrit, even distant Sumerian, yet the script remains stubbornly silent. Was it a ledger of grain taxes? Poetry praising forgotten gods. Without a bilingual inscription, we may never know the voices of Mohenjo-Daro's market vendors or the decrees of its leaders. Then there are the gaps, entire cities that history barely whispers about. Take the kingdom of Yamhad in ancient Syria, once powerful enough to rival Babylon. Clay tablets mention its splendor, its kings who married Egyptian pharaohs' daughters. But where was its capital, Halab? Modern Aleppo stands atop its ruins, making excavation nearly impossible. Generations of conquest have layered over its streets, leaving us with only second-hand accounts of its glory. It's as if the city dissolved into myth, its physical presence erased by time's relentless recycling. Beneath the jungles of Cambodia, LiDAR technology has revealed sprawling urban networks around Angkor cities so vast they dwarf medieval Paris, but who lived in these suburban sprawls? What stories played out in their wooden homes, long since devoured by termites and rot? The stone temples endure, but the ordinary lives, the laughter in marketplaces, the gossip at wells, are gone without a trace. Perhaps the most haunting absences are the deliberate ones. When the Hittites abandoned Hattusa around 1200 BCE, they didn't just leave, they hid their archives. Thousands of baked clay tablets were buried in vaults, preserving treaties, rituals, and laws while the city above crumbled. Was it an act of preservation or a final defiance against oblivion? We can read their words today, but the context, the faces behind the scribbles, is lost forever. And then there are the Earth's stubborn holdouts. In the Amazon, rumors persist of Ciudades Perdidas, cities of gold hidden beneath the canopy. Local tribes speak of stone ruins older than the Inca, but the jungle guards them well. Even with drones and multispectral imaging, some sites refuse to be found, or perhaps we're simply asking the wrong questions. The truth is, every answer archaeology uncovers spawns new mysteries. Why did the people of Great Zimbabwe abandon their stone towers without a struggle? What catastrophe prompted the mass burial at Tanis, where hastily interred nobles wore masks of pure gold? the ground keeps its secrets close, revealing just enough to remind us how much we've yet to learn. These silent cities challenge us to listen harder, not just to the grand monuments, but to the faint echoes between the stones. The ruins of these vanished cities aren't just relics, they're mirrors reflecting our own vulnerabilities and triumphs. Take the Indus Valley's meticulous urban planning, where streets aligned with precision and wastewater systems rivaled modern engineering. Their downfall wasn't invasion or war, but something far quieter, the slow poisoning of their soil from over-irrigation, a warning about how easily human ingenuity can backfire when disconnected from nature's rhythms. Today, as aquifers drain and farmlands turn to dust, their story feels less like ancient history and more like a cautionary tale playing out in real time. Then there's the paradox of Angkor, a city built to master water yet undone by it. The Khmer Empire's vast reservoirs and canals were feats of engineering, designed to withstand monsoons and droughts alike. But when the climate shifted unpredictably, their rigid systems couldn't adapt. The lesson, resilience, isn't just about strength, it's about flexibility. Modern cities facing rising seas and erratic weather might take note. Infrastructure that can't bend will eventually break. Yet these civilizations also offer blueprints for survival. The Maya's northern enclaves, like Chichen Itza, didn't just endure drought, they thrived by shifting crops and tapping new water sources. Their adaptability hints at a truth we're only now embracing. Sometimes preservation means transformation. When the people of Mohenjo-Daro abandoned their salt-choked fields, they didn't vanish, they reinvented themselves in smaller, sustainable communities. Their legacy whispers that letting go of one way of life can be the first step toward another. Perhaps the most haunting insight comes from places like Cahokia, where inequality left fractures too deep to mend. The elite lived atop mounds, literally looking down on a populace straining under dwindling resources. Archaeologists find parallels in our own world, towers of glass and steel rising as coastlines creep inward, as if we've learned nothing from the past. But the hope lies in stories like that of the Garamontes, who migrated south when their Sahara oasis dried up, carrying knowledge rather than clinging to sinking ground. These lost cities remind us that collapse isn't inevitable, it's a series of choices. The Acadians ignored shifting climate patterns until famine tore their empire apart. The Romans neglected aqueducts until disease followed, but they also show us the flip side, the power of foresight. The ancestral Pueblones left Mesa Verde before the worst droughts hit, proving that survival often belongs to those who read the signs early. What ties these threads together isn't doom but possibility. The same rivers that nurtured Mesopotamia now sustain billions. The trade routes that linked the Indus Valley span continents today. The difference this time, we have their stories. We know how civilizations falter and how they endure. The question isn't whether we'll face similar challenges, but whether we'll heed the whispers of those who came before. Their ruins aren't just tombs, they're classrooms, and the final exam is one we're all taking right now. The skylines of today's megacities glitter with steel and glass, monuments to human progress, but beneath the surface, the same forces that toppled ancient civilizations are stirring. Take Jakarta, a metropolis of 10 million sinking into the Java Sea at a rate of 10 inches per year. Like Mohenjo-Daro's battle with rising salinity, the city's over-reliance on groundwater has caused the land to collapse. Or consider Phoenix, where the Colorado River's dwindling flow threatens the water supply for millions, mirroring the plight of the Khmer Empire as Angkor's reservoirs ran dry. The parallels aren't coincidental, they're cyclical, but climate change is only part of the equation. Overpopulation strains infrastructure in ways that would make even the Romans shudder. Lagos, Nigeria, grows by 77 people every hour, its streets buckling under crowds that rival ancient Babylon at its peak. Yet unlike Babylon's meticulously planned boulevards, modern urban sprawl often prioritizes speed over sustainability. The result, cities like Mexico City, built on drained lake beds, now face a paradoxical crisis, sinking while simultaneously running out of water, much like the Aztec capital Tenochtitlan before it. Resource scarcity adds another layer of vulnerability. The lithium batteries powering our electric future depend on mines in Chile's Atacama Desert, where water disputes echo the conflicts over Indus Valley trade routes 4,000 years ago. Meanwhile, soil degradation in China's Yellow River Basin, the same region that doomed Liangzhu, now threatens nearly 20% of the country's arable land. Yet history doesn't have to repeat itself. Tokyo's earthquake-resistant architecture proves we can learn from seismic disasters that crushed Knossos. Amsterdam's floating neighborhoods offer a blueprint for living with water rather than fighting it, a lesson the Maya might have embraced, the difference this time. We have satellites mapping deforestation in real time, algorithms predicting drought patterns, and global networks to share solutions. The real risk isn't the challenges themselves, it's complacency. Venice installs flood barriers centuries after the Adriatic began rising, while Miami debates seawalls as saltwater infiltrates its foundations. Like the rulers of Cahokia clinging to their mounds, we often wait until the crisis is at our doorstep. But the ghosts of these lost cities aren't just warnings, they're invitations. They whisper that adaptation isn't surrender, it's the ultimate innovation. The next chapter of urban survival won't be written in concrete, but in our willingness to listen to the past. The legend of Atlantis begins with a whisper from ancient Greece, a tale told by Plato around 360 BC, describing an advanced island kingdom that angered the gods and sank beneath the waves in a single day. For centuries, scholars have debated whether Atlantis was pure fiction, a moral parable about hubris, or a distorted memory of a real civilization lost to time. What's fascinating isn't just the story itself, but why it sticks with us. Could this enduring myth have roots in the fate of actual river cities that vanished without a trace? Consider the parallels. Plato's Atlantis was said to boast concentric rings of water and land, a design echoing the canal systems of Mesopotamia or the hydraulic networks of the Khmer Empire. Its people were described as master engineers, much like the builders of Mohenjo-Daro or Angkor, and its catastrophic end, a sudden submergence, mirrors real-world disasters like the collapse of Helike or the flooding of Liangzhu. It's as if Atlantis distilled the collective trauma of civilizations that rose and fell along life-giving rivers, only to be erased by the very waters that sustained them. Archaeologists have proposed candidates for Atlantis's real-world inspiration. The Minoan civilization on Santorini, obliterated by a volcanic eruption around 1600 BCE, left behind frescoes of vibrant seascapes and sophisticated architecture until the sea swallowed them whole. Others point to the Richat structure in Mauritania, a natural geologic formation so perfectly circular it seems designed, though no evidence of a sunken city exists there. But perhaps the most compelling connection lies not in geography, but in pattern. Like Atlantis, many river cities thrived in harmony with their environment until they pushed too far, triggering their own undoing. What's haunting is how the Atlantis myth endures precisely because it feels plausible. In an age of rising sea levels and climate uncertainty, the idea of a society vanishing beneath the waves isn't just fantasy, it's a visceral fear. The legend's power lies in its ambiguity, a warning about the fragility of human achievement, wrapped in the allure of a mystery waiting to be solved. Whether Atlantis was real or not, its legacy is undeniable. It reminds us that every golden age is fleeting and that the rivers we rely on can become currents of reckoning. The search for Atlantis, then, isn't just about finding a lost city. It's about understanding why we're so drawn to stories of civilizations that slipped through time's fingers. Preserving these ancient ruins isn't just about saving stones. It's about safeguarding the very roots of human ingenuity. Take the ongoing rescue of Mohenjo-Daro in Pakistan, where rising groundwater threatens to dissolve the world's oldest brick structures. Teams of archaeologists and engineers pump out water around the clock, battling not just nature but bureaucratic delays and funding shortages. Meanwhile, in Cambodia, the temples of Angkor face a different enemy, the feet of millions of tourists. The soft sandstone steps of Angkor Wat are eroding faster than ever, prompting innovative solutions like timed entry systems and reinforced walkways. These efforts aren't just maintenance, they're a race against time to keep history's textbooks from crumbling. But preservation isn't only a technical challenge, it's a cultural tightrope. When Italy's Pompeii launched its conservation project, critics clashed over whether to restore frescoes to their original vibrancy or leave them as the eruption's ghostly shadows. Similar debates rage at Machu Picchu, where indigenous groups argue that modern reconstructions erase the sacred essence of the site. Striking this balance requires more than mortar and lasers. It demands respect for the living communities still connected to these places. In Turkey's Göbekli Tepe, the oldest known temple complex, local villagers now work as guides, weaving oral traditions into official tours. Their stories don't just interpret the past, they keep it alive. Technology offers hope where tradition meets innovation. Drones map crumbling Maya cities in Guatemala, creating 3D models so precise they can predict which walls might collapse next. In Egypt, AI deciphers faded hieroglyphs on tombs, revealing recipes for ancient perfumes and forgotten prayers. Even crowdsourcing plays a role. Apps like Global Explorer let armchair archaeologists scan satellite images for undiscovered ruins, turning preservation into a global mission. Yet for all these tools, the greatest threat remains indifference. When ISIS bulldozed Nimrod's Assyrian treasures or traffickers looted Syria's Apamea, the world reacted with outrage, but funding for protection still lags behind the demand. The lesson from these efforts is clear. Saving our past requires more than nostalgia. It takes science, community, and a willingness to adapt. The Maya didn't build their cities to be museum pieces, they built them to thrive. Maybe that's the real key to preservation, not freezing ruins in time, but letting them keep teaching, keep inspiring, keep reminding us that every civilization leaves footprints. And if we listen, those footprints can still show us the way forward. The ruins of these river cities stand as silent witnesses to a truth we often forget. No civilization, no matter how grand, is built to last forever. Walking through the crumbled streets of Mohenjo-Daro or gazing at the faded murals of Angkor, we're confronted with the same humbling question. If empires that thrived for centuries could vanish so completely, what does that mean for our own bustling metropolises? The lesson isn't one of doom, but of perspective. These cities didn't just disappear, they transformed, their people adapting, their knowledge scattering like seeds to take root elsewhere. Think about the echoes they left behind. The Indus Valley's standardized bricks influenced construction for millennia. The legal codes carved into Babylon stones became the bedrock of modern justice. Even the failures, the over-irrigated fields, the deforested hillsides offer blueprints for what not to do. In that way, these lost cities aren't just relics, they're teachers. They show us that resilience isn't about building higher walls, but about learning to bend without breaking. So what will remain of our cities in 1,000 years? Perhaps it won't be the steel skyscrapers or concrete highways, but the quieter traces, the underground fiber optic lines fossilized in sediment, the stubborn fragments of climate-resistant ceramics, or even the digital ghosts of our stories, preserved in some future equivalent of cuneiform. The real legacy of these river cities isn't in their stones, but in the ideas they set in motion. Now we turn to you. Which of these vanished worlds captivates your imagination the most? Is it the orderly streets of Harappa, the soaring temples of Thebes, or the watery labyrinths of Angkor? Share your thoughts below, and if you've ever stood among the ruins of an ancient city, tell us what whispers you heard in the wind. Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into history's greatest enigmas. After all, the past isn't just a place we visit, it's a mirror reflecting back the choices that might shape our own.